Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am your host, Michael Clifford, aka Slim Cliffy. You'll notice kind of flying solo here today. Josh is away. He had a doctor's appointment. He said yesterday on the show he had a doctor's appointment with his son, so he's not going to be here. So it's just me. So, if anybody has any questions or anything, I might not be able to get to them. It's quite a bit to go through today, actually. There's quite a lot of news for what is seemingly just a normal 8-game slate here tonight. But yes, we are sponsored by Better. We will have a little bit of a breakdown of what Better can offer later in the show. Before we get any further, if you guys could, please like and subscribe. Those likes, those subscriptions really help us, really help the Stochastic channel keep these shows coming along. If these video shows aren't your thing, if you prefer podcast form, maybe for a commute home or something like that, you can certainly do that. Just head on over to the Stochastic podcast channels. We are available everywhere. Final bit of news. If you want to get into the Osmo Hall of Fame, there's one way you can do that. You finish in the top 3 of a contest with at least 5,000 contestants. You make sure that you have the Stochastic avatar as your avatar, which you can get at stochastic.com/avatar. If you place in the top 3, just tweet your win over to the Stochastic Hoff account on Twitter, or you can email support if you don't have Twitter. And if you do all that, you can win a free month of Stochastic, of a package of your choice, be it NHL, NFL, NFL still going strong, NBA, of course. MLB winter meetings are heating up, and MLB is not quite here yet. But you can get in the Stochastic Hall of Fame. You can get a free month. It is only available once every 12 months. So if you keep winning, you can't keep getting free stuff. But if you keep winning, you probably won't need the free stuff anyway. Not much to talk about from yesterday's slate. It was pretty much Arizona smash, and then everybody else, just kind of, scored a few goals here and there. Unfortunately, our Arizona 2, our boys didn't quite get there. They didn't do a whole lot. It was the top line that really did the damage. Nick Schmaltz had a couple goals. Clayton Keller had 3 assists in the first period alone, I believe. So Arizona top line, their power play certainly did work. Washington did not. Washington looks like the biggest paper tiger of all the Eastern Conference teams, at least the ones that look to be playoff contenders. I don't think they really have the depth to get there. They need Evgeny Kuznetsov to come around. He's been pretty terrible this year. Healthy scratch for a good reason last night. Maybe that kind of gets his season going, but we'll see what happens as we move along. I'm not going to smack talk Washington too much. I feel like they're going to get their own comeuppance here soon enough. But not a great showing by the Capitals, certainly. I have to give it up to Montreal. I watched the Montreal Seattle game last night. Slavkovsky was on the top line for the Habs. Montreal looked pretty dominant through the first 2 periods. We call it the Wanda's flu when visiting teams go into Montreal and they have a night off. I think Seattle got there late Sunday night, so they would have had late Saturday night, so they would have had Saturday night and Sunday night in Montreal. That can be a dangerous thing if you got a little bit of money and you're in your 20s. So nice to see Montreal doing well. A bunch of, slumps busted last night. Monahan, Josh Anderson, certainly, Tanner Pearson. Winnipeg certainly looked like they might get there last night. We got a couple quick goals from Nick Ehlers and Kyle Connor. I shouldn't say a couple quick goals, a couple goals in the first half of the game, and then nothing else the rest of the way. That was a little bit unfortunate. Hopefully we can get some winners on the board here tonight. Are the Caps in a retirement home? I don't know. Maybe. Might not be that far away, honestly. It's honestly at the point now, I wrote about this elsewhere, where I'm not sure that Alex Ovechkin should be their primary option on the power play. Like it honestly probably should be Tom Wilson, which is kind of funny to think about. It's like, how do you get the puck to Tom Wilson on the power play? Might be the thing that turns it around. They got to figure something out, because I have a feeling they're going to start racking up the losses here in pretty short order. But let's jump into this slate. We have 8 games ahead of us. There are, I wouldn't say a bunch of low totals, but there are a handful of low totals here today. This is a higher scoring era of the NHL. We're pretty used to seeing a lot of games where both teams are at 3.0 or above. You have San Jose, obviously, with a pretty low total today. You have Chicago with a low total. You have Anaheim. You have Columbus. Ottawa does not have a high total. We'll get to them in a second. Let's get to that Columbus game first. The Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2.7 total. They're at home to the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings are sporting a 3.7 total. We don't have official confirmation on both goalies here, but I suspect it'll be Elvis Merzlikins against Phoenix Copley. Interesting going with Copley. He's had a pretty bad start to the year, 868 save percentage. Obviously, they can't ride Cam Talbot into the ground. I think Cam Talbot's older than I am at this point, which is really saying something. So it might be Copley. That is an easier matchup in net for the Columbus to shoot on. So it kind of changes the way I look at them a little bit. We'll get to Columbus in a second, but it is the Los Angeles side I want to start with. And what I want to start with is our top stacks tool. We're really not seeing a lot of ownership on Los Angeles 1 or Los Angeles 2 here tonight. There's a couple reasons for that. One, Los Angeles 2 has come up a lot in price. There are times this year where that second line with Deneau and Moore, whether, they had Laferriere there beside them, whether they had Victor Arvidsson, whatever it might be, Arthur Kaliev was there for a few games, whatever it might be. There's a lot of times they're around the 14K range. They've come up a lot, 17,500 on DraftKings. Trevor Moore is at 6K, I believe, or a little over 6K on DraftKings. That's really, really high for him. He's a good player. I don't think in DFS he's like a $6,500 DK player, almost regardless of where he's playing. That is a pretty high. That's a pretty steep price to pay. Here's the thing is that obviously Columbus has struggled pretty heavily defensively so far this season. They've changed up their lines a little bit. Columbus has moved Justin Danforth to the top line with Boone Jenner and Johnny Gaudreau, moving Kent Johnson down to the Adam Fantilli, Patrick Laine line. And of course, their all-Russian line of Marchenko, Voronkov, and Chinnikov still the same. Fantilli and Laine just have absolutely brutal defensive numbers so far this season. 3.4 expected goals against per 60 minutes with them on the ice. Over 5 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. They are getting absolutely throttled in the defensive zone. And, now that Josh isn't here, it's my chance to slander Kent Johnson. Kent Johnson certainly cannot make up the defensive effort by himself on the other wing. I don't think he's a good defensive winger on his own, even a defensive center. He's more of a playmaking type, but that's not going to help them in the defensive zone. It's a really good matchup for that Los Angeles second line. Kevin Fiala is the only guy on the top power play unit. Los Angeles has gone back to a heavily used top power play unit because you have Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield all on the top power play now with Kevin Fiala. That doesn't really change too much for me because it's not really a great power play spot. Columbus doesn't take a lot of penalties, 2.9 times shorthanded per game. League average right now is at about 3.4 and still dropping, so they're well below that. The penalty kill has generally been fine this season. Now, what I will say is that I think adding Quinton Byfield will change a lot. We don't have a big sample on the Kings top line with Byfield there on the power play. Obviously, he just got there. But he's been probably their best playmaker so far this season. And that is really saying something on a team that has Kevin Fiala on it, or even Ante Kopitar for that matter, even at this stage of his career. It is Byfield that has been not necessarily the finisher, but certainly the engine offensively for the top line. I think he could bring the same thing to the top power play unit, help them generate some more shots, some better quality shots. He had a couple goals on the weekend, so he's starting to finish on his own. I just think it's a much better matchup for that Kings second line, Fiala, Moore, and Deneau. Problem is they have come up so much in price, right? They're only $800 cheaper than the Kings top line. The Kings top line is perfectly correlated on the top power play unit. And that Kings top line is only coming in with 1.6% ownership. There's a lot of weird ownership here today because of Colorado. We'll get to that at the end, but Colorado's kind of throwing things all out of whack. But as much as I like the matchup for the Kings second line at even strength, it's not as if a Jenner, Danforth, Gaudreau top line is anything to be feared. With or without Kent Johnson, the defensive numbers for the top line were pretty poor, routinely getting outplayed game in and game out. I'm not worried about that matchup. The Kings top line, their numbers have slid a little bit over the last couple of weeks. They're not generating as much offensively, but this is a good matchup to get things going again. And the last note about the matchup is Columbus has been sending out Zach Werenski and Adam Bokvist in a shutdown role, which it's interesting because, Werenski's a good defenseman. I don't think anybody would say he's an elite defensive defenseman. And Adam Bokvist, the reason why he's been in and out of the lineup for like 3 years now is because he is so unreliable defensively. Their defensive numbers are not good together this year. What they're being saved by is .955 goaltending behind them. Eventually that goaltending is going to fall off. You just cannot sustain that. And I think that means I'm going to lean to Kings 1 here. Like, as much as their offense has fallen off, they're still driving the play more than they're allowing. Like I said, Byfield has jumped to the top power play unit, so they're perfectly correlated on the power play for whatever that might be worth here today. This is the highest total on this. It's the second highest total on the slate. Sorry, Colorado's obviously the highest, but Los Angeles is carrying the second highest total on the slate here tonight. And again, I'll bring up the top stacks tool quickly, but the top stacks tool is showing the Kings top line at 1.6% ownership here tonight. I got to say, at 1.6% ownership, perfectly correlated against a Columbus team that just isn't very good. I really like Kings 1 here. I think both top lines are certainly in play, Kings 1 and Kings 2. No issue using either of them. Los Angeles 3 is kind of interesting because Dubois and Grundstrom actually have pretty good numbers in a small sample. Obviously there's no matchup concerns or anything against the Columbus depth. I just worry that we're going to see quite a bit of like Dubois Grundstrom or Dubois Laferriere or something like that in those Colorado lineups. But if you're not playing Colorado, I think Los Angeles' top line should be one of the top lines in consideration here tonight. On the Columbus side, like, there's no ownership on Columbus. With Justin Danforth there, he's kind of just a guy. Like, he's just kind of filling in for them a little bit because everything else is going wrong. Like, Kent Johnson really hasn't played well on the top line. Like, Kent Johnson's kind of stuck in that spot where he's too good for the AHL, but he's not good enough to, I think, slide into a top 6 in the NHL right now. It's still lots of time to develop. Like, we bring it up all the time. Just think of Casey Middlestad in Buffalo. It took him like 6 years basically to develop into a top 6 player. Give Kent Johnson a little bit of time. He's just not there yet. The other thing is they've changed up their power play. They booted Johnny Gaudreau off the power play. He's on the second unit now, moved Ivan Provorov to the top unit, which is kind of interesting because Los Angeles' penalty kill numbers have been sliding a little bit lately. I don't know if moving Ivan Provorov to the top power play unit is going to solve everything, especially in place of Johnny Gaudreau. Whatever people might think of him, he is a much better playmaker than Ivan Provorov is. Like, even if Gaudreau's, fallen off by like 50% compared to 3 years ago, which he hasn't, but, certainly things have not gone well. He's still a much better playmaker. I don't think that's really going to do anything to the top power play unit. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried that for one power play. If things don't go well, they change it up for the very next one. So at least for now, Boone Jenner power play 1, Johnny Gaudreau power play 2, Justin Danforth on neither. That really doesn't do a whole lot for me. The Kings second line has been really, really good defensively, so that worries me for that Fantilli Johnson line A matchup. I'm going to be honest, there's just not a lot that I like for Columbus in this matchup, but it is Phoenix, Copley, and net. Like, that's the one thing that I'm kind of keeping in the back of my mind. And, Patrick Laine has been shooting a little bit more lately. Like, it's easy to slam Laine and slam Columbus. Don't get me wrong. I do my fair share of that. But Laine got off to a bad start last year as well, got injured, and then came back and scored like 20 goals in 45 games or something like that. Like, he went on a tear. He's still capable of doing that. So, like, if you want a one-off Fantilli because he's still in the top power play unit, perfectly fine. One-off Laine, perfectly fine. I just don't know if I'm full stacking anything from Columbus. I think that's a side where I'd be more inclined to go pick some one-offs from rather than full stack anything. All right, let's move along. Our next game, the New York Rangers, 3.2 total going into Ottawa. The Ottawa Senators have a 2-point 8 total. We have Igor Shesterkin going back for the Rangers. He had kind of a so-so start to the season, but he's really looked a lot more like himself over the last month. Anton Forsberg looks like he's going to be starting for Ottawa. I think that makes sense for the team. You know, they got to start racking up wins here, especially this month of December where they have a bunch of games. Forsberg just had a shutout on Saturday. Korpisalo had a few losses in a row, so you may as well just go back to Forsberg. Thomas Chabot is going to be out tonight for Ottawa, and that is very important for a number of reasons. The first reason is obviously it takes a pretty good puck-moving defenseman out of their lineup. He is one of the best at what he does in the league, and you know there's a reason why they play him so many minutes, even above Chychrun, even above Sanderson, often when he's in the lineup. But the other interesting part is what's that going to do to the power play? Because when Chabot was injured, you know, he just came back last week, the week before. When Chabot was injured before that, they went to one heavily used top power play unit, almost always run by Jake Sanderson. When Chabot came back, they went basically to 2 split units. They had their normal top power play guys with Chabot running it. Then they had, you know, Tarasenko and Giroux with Jake Sanderson and Jacob Chychrun both running the blue line on power play 2. And they, like, honestly, they basically split minutes. It was one of the reasons why I wrote up Vladimir Tarasenko this morning in the picks article, free to read over at Stochastic.com. Just head on over to the NHL section right up on the main page. One of the reasons why I wrote up Tarasenko before we got that news was that they had been splitting the power play units. Tarasenko was moving up to the second line. You know, moving up to the second line for Tarasenko plus getting more power play time was a big boost to his DFS value. Now I'm not so sure what's going to happen. The crux of this is that Ridley Greig is also coming back for Ottawa here tonight. He's going to be the third line center for Dominic Kubalik and Matthew Joseph. Ridley Greig had actually gotten off to a pretty good start this season. I know a lot of the attention had been on Shane Pinto, whether rightly or wrongly. But Greig had 7 points in 9 games to start the year, averaging 2 shots a game while getting just 14 minutes a night. He's a guy that was skating at times on their second power play unit. So I'm wondering if they don't still split the power play time, but kind of just, you know, move Sanderson back up to the top power play where he had been, and then just move Greig basically into Sanderson's spot on power play 2, and then just keep moving things along. So I'm wondering if they don't do that. We don't know what they're going to do until they hit the ice. My guess is that they go back to the heavily used top power play unit with Sanderson, just because that's what they had run with Chabot out previously. But that was also with Greig out, and I think Greig coming back might change that equation. So I'm not so certain that they're going to have a heavily used top power play unit, and that's important because Ottawa does draw the most power plays per game of anyone in the league. 4.32 per game, slightly edging out Detroit, and those two teams are way out ahead of everyone else. So when you have a team drawing so many power plays, you know, they have 15 power play goals in 19 games already this season. That's pretty important to try to kind of suss out. I assume it's going to be split units, but I guess we'll find out in about 5 hours' time. Now, they're going, as I mentioned, they're going with Tarasenko on the second line with Batherson and Stützle. The reason that line is interesting to me specifically is there's some playmaking data that I look at from a website called All Three Zones. And Stützle and Tarasenko are 1 and 2 amongst their team's forwards. Actually, Greig is up there too, but his sample's still really, really small because he was injured. So basically, Stützle and Tarasenko are 1-2 on the team in scoring chance assists. Now, what scoring chance assists are they're just assists on a teammate's scoring chance. So it kind of helps us figure out who is creating dangerous opportunities for their teammates. Stützle and Tarasenko, like I said, are 1-2, and now they're both on the same line, setting up Drake Batherson, who has started to come alive over the last couple of weeks with his goal scoring after basically been in like a year-long drought. And they're not coming in with much ownership. That's the other thing here. Top Stacks tool has them coming in 2% ownership on DraftKings tonight, 4% top 2 stack percentage. So positive leverage per top stacks tool, they're only 16,600 on DraftKings. So as long as you're not playing Tampa Bay, as long as you're not playing Colorado, you can basically fit them in with anyone that you want. And Stützle and Tarasenko, a very small sample, talking 35 minutes here. But they've created 32 shots and 2 goals in those 35 minutes together. That is a lot of offense in a very limited sample. Stützle and Batherson both play the top power play unit. This line will probably actually go out against the second line from the Rangers. And the reason that's important is Ottawa, they try to stick to their line matching. Doesn't always work out, but they try to stick to their line matching. And if they go out against the Rangers second line, what I wrote about in the section on Tarasenko for that picks article was that since the Rangers added Vincent Trocheck to the second line, that line is allowing 16% more shot attempts and 39% more expected goals against. So he's helping them stay afloat offensively. The Rangers second line is still an excellent offensive line, but they've been allowing a lot more expected goals and shots against, and it's also leading to a lot more goals against. Now, as I said, Igor Shesterkin has looked a lot more like himself of late. I'm still a little bit worried about the Rangers' second line and their defensive ability, and I think that makes a good matchup for Ottawa too. So I don't mind going to that Ottawa second line here tonight. You're going to get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. If they do split the units, that just means more time for Tarasenko. You're probably getting the 2 best playmakers on the team, at least so far this season, between Stützle and Tarasenko, with Batherson, who desperately needs playmakers to play with. Stützle obviously is a dual threat type of player. He can both shoot and score. They're not expensive. I think things are lining up well for that Ottawa second line, so I don't mind them as a stack here tonight. If you want to go to the top line, I don't have a huge problem with it. But Brady Tkachuk and Josh Norris don't have very good offensive numbers together this season. I don't think that should be surprising because Tkachuk and Norris are both shooters. And, Giroux is a playmaker. He's still a good player. I don't think he's the guy that he was 5 or 6 years ago. Even if he's still like a low-end first liner, he was a true superstar 4 or 5 years ago. He's not that anymore. And the playmaking numbers just aren't there to support Norris and Tkachuk, and they can't, somebody has to set them up for the shots. I'm fine going with Ottawa 1 just because they don't have a lot of ownership, but 2.7 expected goals for with Tkachuk and Norris on the ice this season and 115 minutes together. That's not that great. So I think I like Ottawa 2 more in this matchup. Ottawa 3, I think they're playable with Grieg back. They're one of those stacks you could probably put in with Colorado if you want to. Other than that, I don't see a real need to play them. So it's Ottawa 2 for me on that side. On the Rangers side, Johnny Brodzinski's jumping to the top line. That's an interesting name, actually, because Johnny Brodzinski, for anybody that might not know him, was a really, really good scorer in the AHL as an older player. Brodzinski, I think he had a stretch where he had 32 goals in 63 AHL games over the span of a couple seasons, because he's a guy that gets called up to the AHL or called up to the NHL and sent back to the AHL frequently. But he had shown an ability to score. We have seen late bloomers in the AHL come to be NHL scorers. Jonathan Marchessault obviously is the example that we always go to, but just look at Michael Carcone in Arizona. Now, he's shooting 50% over the last 4 weeks. I suspect that Brodzinski won't shoot 50% over a larger sample, but Lund's not coming in with any ownership either. 1.9% here tonight. Going up against Tkachuk and Norris, that's not really a matchup that I would be too afraid of. Shabbat missing hurts them, doesn't hurt them so much defensively, but he helps generate offense, which gets the puck out of the defensive zone. And that's something some of their defensemen struggle with. So I get wanting to go back to the Rangers second line, Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere. I have no problem going back to them. I just think that people are going to stay away from that top line because of Brodzinski. You still get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play, with Zibanejad and Kreider. Brodzinski has shown the ability to score at lower levels. All he needs is just one good game at the NHL level. So I like Rangers 1 here. Rangers 1, Ottawa 2 for me out of that game. All right, let's move it along. Detroit Red Wings, 3.4 total. They're going into Buffalo. The Buffalo Sabres have a 3.1 total. Some pretty big news in this game. One, Patrick Kane is not going to be in the lineup. I know he's been practicing with the team. He was on the power play, all that stuff in their practices. He's not going to play tonight. On the Buffalo side, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is sick, so Eric Comrie is going to be starting for Buffalo here tonight. Eric Comrie, also a goalie that's not had a good season. There's a reason why Devin Levi was in the AHL and Pekka Luukkonen was getting all the starts. Levi wasn't playing well, and Eric Comrie, 866 save percentage this season, giving up 4 goals every 60 minutes. Those just are really, really bad numbers. But Buffalo is getting back Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson, they said he had been skating a little bit. It was expected he'd be back later this week. It looks like he's ready a little early. Whether he's forcing it or not, I guess we'll find out. But he's going to the top line. He's going to be playing with Jeff Skinner and Casey Middlestat. And the reason why he's going onto the wing is because Alex Tuch is also out here tonight. He's going to be out for a week or so. So, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, their only good goalie this season, is out. Alex Tuch is out. Jordan Greenway, obviously, still out. Zemgus Girgensons is injured. Like, there is a lot of injuries on this Buffalo side, even with getting Tage Thompson back. There's no real sample for Tage Thompson, Casey Middlestat, and Jeff Skinner. What I will say is that in 120 minutes this season for Middlestat and Skinner without Alex Tuch, with anybody else on the other side, be it JJ Peterka, I think Zach Benson played there for a game. Victor Olofsson got a spin up there. But in 120 minutes for Skinner and Middlestat, 3.5 expected goals for, 3.6 actual goals scored. They were still generating offense at a pretty high rate. And if line matching is to be believed, shout out at line matching on Twitter, they're going to be going out against the second line from Detroit, which gets them away from the Dylan Larkin matchup, which gets them away from top defense pairs. All 3 guys are likely to be on the top power play unit as well. So you get Middlestat, Skinner, and Thompson all on the top power play unit together. As I said, Middlestat and Skinner, pretty good offensive numbers together this season. Middlestat, really good playmaking numbers. Like we mentioned on the last show, but Casey Middlestat has been one of the best even strength point producers basically since the All-Star break of last season. Like, we're up over a 50-game sample now. Thing is like they're coming in with quite a bit of ownership. I'm going to bring that up here real soon. Don't worry. 11.3% ownership on the top line, which I think makes sense. You have a total over 3. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. The third and fourth lines, unless, Victor Olofsson somehow jumps back up to the top power play unit or something like that, the third and fourth lines probably won't contribute much offensively. So you're basically looking at all the goals coming from the top 6, and with the 3 guys on the top power play unit, that makes a lot of sense. But they're still coming with a little bit of positive leverage because their top 2 stack percentage sits at 12% here tonight. That's 4th on our list and basically 3rd of the non-Colorado teams. So that's pretty good. The one thing I worry about is what Tage Thompson had been doing before he got injured. Like, he had struggled to score this year, and it wasn't necessarily just, small sample shooting percentage issues. A big part of it is where he was shooting from. They had basically completely abandoned shots from the slot, and we're shooting a lot more from the circles. And when you shoot more from the circles, especially once you get out towards the tops of the face-off dots, you have less of the net to shoot at, so you're shooting at a sharper angle. It's easier to miss the net, obviously, with a greater shot distance than shooting from the slot. Defenders have more time to get in the way to block shots and things like that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where if you can get a clean pass across and a clean one-timer off, we've seen Ovechkin do it for 20 years now, basically, you can get a wide-open net to shoot at. But if even the smallest, slightest thing goes wrong, it gives the defenders time to get over. You have a lot longer shot distance, et cetera, et cetera. That's what kind of worries me, is that they abandoned what worked for them last year to adopt a new offensive strategy this year that just hadn't worked out. Do they return to what they had been doing last season? Does their new strategy start working out all of a sudden? I guess we're going to find out at at over 17K. I think they're perfectly fine to play here tonight. The thing is like they're priced right in that range of the LA top line, right? They're only $900 cheaper than the LA top line. The LA top line's coming in with a fraction of the ownership in a game where they have a much higher goal total. So I think going to Los Angeles instead makes sense, but I don't mind Buffalo 1 here. Buffalo 2 is kind of interesting because they're one of those lines, the Cousins, Benson, Peterka line. They are one of those lines that really does like to trade chances back and forth. They'll probably see a little mostly top 6 matchups from Detroit, so they're certainly going to be going out against the Larkin line a little bit. Before Tage Thompson got hurt, Buffalo had been using the Krebs line in a shutdown role, but that was with Zemgus Girgensons there, and Girgensons has hurt himself, so I don't know if they go back to that line matching. I think they might end up using Dylan Cousins and Casey Middlestad's lines for shutdowns. Not worried about that defensive matchup for the Detroit side. Let's talk about that Detroit side. Detroit won. We don't know exactly what the lineup is going to look like for Detroit because they have been practicing with Patrick Kane on the second line, centered by Joe Veleno. Obviously, Joe Veleno in Detroit's last game was on the top line with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond. My best guess right now is Larkin, Raymond, and Joe Veleno. They go back to that top line, and JT Compher, Alex DeBrincat, Michael Rasmussen. Basically just running back what they had against the Habs on Saturday. That's a little interesting for me because Larkin and Raymond, they've struggled a little bit offensively this year without Alex DeBrincat. The second line has also struggled a little bit when they moved, DeBrincat and Raymond. When they broke all those guys out, the second line has also been struggling a little bit offensively. But there is a 3.4 total for Detroit here. It's tied for the second highest road total here on the slate. I think it's tied for the third highest total overall. So they are expecting goals. I think Lucas Raymond looks much better than he ever has in his NHL career. In his first 2 seasons, he looked like a genuine passenger. He needed other players to make the plays for him. Now he's making the plays himself. Playmaking numbers are looking really good. He's even shooting the puck a little bit. 12 shot attempts per 60 over the last 3 weeks. That's, it's not great, but that's better than what he's shown at times. I don't mind Detroit 1 here tonight. I'm not worried about the matchups from Buffalo whatsoever. Detroit 1 coming in with absolutely no ownership, 0.6% ownership here tonight on that top line. That was with Robbie Fabry, with their projected line. That's with Robbie Fabry there. I don't imagine it'll change much with Joe Veleno there anyway. I like Detroit 1 here. I'm not worried about Eric Comrie. I'm not worried about the Buffalo penalty kill. Detroit does draw 4.3 power plays per game, as I was mentioning earlier. It's second in the league behind Ottawa. I think it's a good matchup for Detroit. I don't see any reason to be afraid of them here tonight. I would like Alex DeBrincat on the top line and top power play unit, but we don't always get what we want. The Rolling Stones told us that years ago. So Larkin, Raymond, and Veleno is what I like from the Detroit side. I also like the Buffalo top line. I just think they're coming in with a little bit too much ownership here tonight. All right. We are presented by Better, and on Better, you can get double your first deposit for up to $500. What Better does is it takes traditional fantasy pick'em concepts and it amplifies them with the ability to win 100x your entry if you correctly select up to 8 picks. You choose wisely and you can watch your winnings soar. Forget about frustrating ties and pushes. Better Picks keeps the excitement flowing with no pushes allowed. Every pick counts and every decision matters. Better covers a wide range of sports, including NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB when it comes back, and a whole bunch more. Whether you're a seasoned sports fan or a casual enthusiast, we offer an extensive selection of player projections to choose from over at Better. Dive into the action, analyze the stats, trust your instincts to make the winning picks. Go and check out Better. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLE. All right, let's move this along to our next batch of games. San Jose, 2.1 implied goal total. They're going into New York. The New York Islanders have a 3.5 goal total. There's not a whole lot to say here, except both sides are going to be widely owned. The Islanders have certainly been allowing goals at times. Ilya Sorokin has been a lot better. It looks like he's going to be starting tonight against Kaapo Kähkönen. Sorokin has been better over the last few weeks, so maybe he's just kind of finding his groove. The Islanders do allow a lot of shots against. Penalty kill has been better lately, but it has struggled this year. The thing is like San Jose just draws a lot of ownership because of their pricing. We're looking at over leveraged San Jose 2. We're looking at over leveraged San Jose 1. Alexander Barabanov, though, is interesting for me with him coming back and skating with Thomas Hertl and William Eklund. The reason why that's interesting is because Barabanov and Hertl actually have decent numbers this season together. Like, not even just San Jose adjusted decent, like decent overall. 2.5 expected goals for, 2.1 expected goals against. Obviously, Barabanov was hurt for a while, but not bad numbers together. And, you know, they're obviously going to come in over-owned. By the same token, they're going to get somewhat easy matchups. Like, you know, they'll see a lot of the Islanders' second and third lines. The Islanders' second and third lines, third line especially, is getting run over with regularity. The second line is really trading chances back and forth. If anything, it'd be Hertl, Eklund, and Barabanov I would go to here tonight, just because Hertl and Barabanov have looked good together so far this season in a pretty small sample. They're cheap. They're one of those filler stacks you can put in. I don't think you have to put on Eklund. Barabanov. I think you can leave Eklund. Just go with a two-man of Hertl and Eklund. Go up against that Islanders penalty kill. No issues there. I'm just waiting for Michael Granlund to burn me again. That guy's been on just an unreal heater. You know, the thing with San Jose, I mentioned on the last show, you know, even that terrible Sabres team of, I think it was a 2014-2015 season, like they had a stretch where they won 9 out of 15 games or something like that, you know, looked like a capable NHL team, and they finished the year with like 22 wins. Like, they're, you know, awful teams are awful teams. San Jose will go back into a funk in not too long. The question is what to do with the Islanders. One thing Josh and I had talked about with the Islanders top line was their problems creating any sort of offense down around the net. And more particularly, the fact that their defensemen were just bombing shots from the point. I'm going to bring up a visual from a website called HockeyViz, not affiliated with us here at Stochastic in any way, but I just want to show kind of the visualization of what it looks like when your defensemen are bombing shots from the point. Here is Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat without Anders Lee at 5-on-5 this season. Look, that red, that is all the shots coming from the blue line. Now, with Anders Lee, look at the front of the net. It is a big, big difference having him on the top line. It's why I wrote Matt Barzal up in the picks article here today. He's made a big difference in how they approach their offense at 5-on-5, and that is a big change for this team because they've actually had a really good power play. They don't draw a lot of power plays. You know, they only draw 2.8 per game, which is, you know, amongst the lowest in the league. In fact, I think them and San Jose are lowest and second lowest for power play opportunities per game. So there may not be a lot of that here tonight, which only puts the 5-on-5 focus or more pressure on the 5-on-5 and brings the focus to how they're creating their offense. I do like that top line for the Islanders here. The problem is they're coming in with 20% expected ownership. You know, if you want to leave Lee off and put somebody like Nelson, like Palmieri up there for a power play stack, I think that's fine. But Lee is the guy that has helped them change the way that they approach the offensive zone. So I'd be kind of inclined to leave him there. I just worry that, you know, there's going to be a whole bunch of like, you know, Buffalo 1 plus the Islanders top line, or, you know, Rangers won plus the Buffalo top line, Minnesota won plus the Buffalo top line, Nashville won, sorry, plus the Islanders top line. I keep saying Buffalo. I don't know why. Hopefully it doesn't mean I'm going to play them here tonight. So I do like the Islanders top line a little bit better here tonight. If you want to go to Islanders too, I think that's perfectly fine. But they're running into the problem that the Islanders top line had is they're still generating about the same number of shots over the last few weeks that they did over the first 5 weeks of the season. It's just that more shots are coming from the defensemen. It's almost like 45% of the shots for the Islanders second line over the last 3 weeks are coming from the defensemen. 45% from the two guys on the blue line for the Islanders second line. It's almost like the defensemen are getting mad that Anders Lee is taking shots away from them. So they're like, screw it. We're going to screw over, Palmieri and Brock Nelson instead. So it is Islanders one I like here. It's just a lot of ownership. You guys have to decide whether you want to play a 20% owned line here tonight. It's a great matchup for it. There's nothing else, not a whole lot else that we can say about it. Next one looks like to be another lopsided matchup. You have Nashville with a 3.4 implied goal total. They're going into Chicago. The Blackhawks have a 2.6. Probably UC Saros for Nashville. Arvid Soderblom in net for Chicago. Soderblom is another one of the goalies that has not been as good as the backup as the starter has. I wrote up Philip Forsberg in the picks article today. He's just had an unreal season thus far, pacing for 46 goals and 96 points, well over 300 shots. Like that's just superb season. He's hit the DraftKings shot bonus in nearly half his games, 11 out of 24. It's a great matchup for them. Since Halloween, the Blackhawks are 30th by expected goals against at 5-on-5, and they've given up 15 power play goals in their last 14 games. These two teams played each other a few weeks ago. Forsberg had an assist with 5 shots in what is kind of like a down game for him. He's the highest projected winger on both DraftKings and FanDuel here tonight, outside of Colorado. Like obviously Colorado, we'll get to them in a second, why they're so high, but Colorado has a lot of high projections for the top guys. Forsberg is the top winger outside of that. So I like Nashville 1 here tonight. Perfectly correlated, not worried about any matchups from the Chicago side. Chicago going with their backup goalie to boot. Problem is like Nashville's another one of those lines that's coming in with a fair bit of ownership here tonight. Not as bad as the Islanders, certainly, but still coming in with double-digit ownership. They're kind of like Buffalo, where they're coming in, low teens, top 2 stack percentage, but double-digit ownership, so not a lot of leverage. They do have less ownership over on FanDuel. So if you want to try them on FanDuel, I think you're going to get a lot more positive leverage over there. One thing that worries me about the Nashville top line is that their offense has started to slow down a little bit. 2.8 expected goals, 3 actual goals per 60 minutes over their last 100 minutes. It's a pretty big slowdown from like their first, 5-6 games together. That's a little bit of a concern, but the matchup does a lot to alleviate those concerns, and it's still a 3.4 total. And there's not a lot else. It's like, where else are the goals going to come from, right? Like the Sissons, Train, and Smith line has actually been fine for Nashville, actually. And Colton Sissons is, Colton Barber Sissons. He's on the top power play unit. So they could get some goals from down there, but you got to figure, if Nashville gets 4 or 5 goals here tonight, that the top perfectly correlated top power play unit is going to figure in. So I do like Nashville 1, but again, they're just one of those lines in that 17 to 19K range that's coming in with double-digit ownership, where I still look at that Kings top line coming in with almost none, and it's just tough for me, to forego that extremely low ownership from Los Angeles 1. But I really do like the spot here from Nashville. There are no matchup concerns. The Chicago penalty kill has taken a dive over the last 5 weeks, like I mentioned. They're starting their worst goalie in net, or the goalie that's played worst so far this season anyway. I think it's a pretty good matchup for Nashville 1. A question I think in this game is what to do with Chicago, because Anthony Beauvillier back, he's going to be on the top line for Chicago, top power play unit, gives them a perfectly correlated top power play unit as well, which is kind of interesting because Nashville has typically not had a good penalty kill this season. It has gotten a little bit better over the last couple of weeks, but in general, it's not been very good. It has been one of the weaknesses of this team. Chicago power plays definitely sucked this year. Don't get me wrong. Hopefully Anthony Beauvillier can help. Beauvillier is a shooter. He's kind of like Bedard. I think, I don't think he'll open any space for Bedard in that sense, but I think Bedard can open space for Beauvillier, and it could help him out offensively. So I don't mind Chicago 1 here tonight, but I still say by far my favorite line in this game is the Nashville top line. I don't know if there's anything in the Chicago depth that I really want to get to. Johnson and Radish haven't really been shooting a lot lately. They're going to be playing with Cole Gutman on the second line. There's just not a lot that I like from the Chicago side outside the top line. Where they're perfectly correlated, I think it's Chicago 1 or bust. But yeah, give me Nashville in this game over everyone else. If you want to give us a shot here at Stochastic, maybe check out the projections that we talk about. Here are some of the top projections here tonight. Here's some of the top ownership. Obviously, we've been talking about our top stacks. If you want access to all these tools, just head on over to stochastic.com and head on over to our packages section, or just click through in the links below. If you click through the links below, it helps this show out. You get access to the best NHL data and tools in the industry. We try to show winners as often as we can. We talked about Elway's Army yesterday on the show. He's been on a real heater of late. We do practice what we preach as well. What we talk about on the show is what we play, but you get ownership to all the projections, so you never really have to listen to us if you want. So you get player and ownership, you get top stacks, you get the line combinations, you get Data Central, which is very helpful. There's even a section for NHL shooting props if you want to try that out. So for people that might be more inclined for betting, you can get expected ROIs for player shot prop total or anytime goal scorer total. So that on top of the Discord, which is very helpful if you're not always at your computer to get late breaking information for games later in the slate. The Discord is very, very helpful for that. So if you want to try this out, just click through the link below, stochastic.com. Come on over and see what we're all about. All right, let's get to these last two games here. First one, Anaheim, 2.5 total. They're going into Colorado. Colorado has a 4.0 total. Obviously, this is where all that ownership that we were talking about is going. On the show on Monday, we were talking about how absurd Colorado's or the show on Saturday, we were talking about how absurd Colorado's top 2 percentage was. Things have gotten even crazier. 58% top 2 percentage for that Colorado top line, coming in at 24,800 on DraftKings tonight. There are a number of reasons for that. One, with that perfectly correlated top line and all the guys playing like at least 20 minutes a night, often getting up to like 23, 24. Nichushkin's been at 27 at sometimes. They're playing a ton of minutes. So all those minutes, perfectly correlated top line against Anaheim. They're easily the best line in the best spot on the slate. There's also the fact that Mason McTavish is going to be out for Anaheim here tonight. He's injured. He did not travel with the team. Anaheim's lineup obviously takes a big hit with him out. He's a big part of their offensive attack. Jakob Silfverberg is going to be moving to the Anaheim second line instead. So Mason McTavish is out. Obviously, they're still without Trevor Zegras. They're going to be starting John Gibson in net. Anaheim is the most penalized team in the league, 4.5 times shorthanded per game. No other team is above 4. It's just a great spot for Colorado. Here's the thing. Colorado's top line numbers, I think anybody that's been playing them over the last week or so can tell you, have been taking a dive. 2.3 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals over the last 2 weeks. You got to wonder if these guys just aren't getting a little bit tired. Like, they've had to play a ton of minutes since Arturi Lekkonen's injury. And tonight makes 4 games in 6 days for this line. Those three other games being on the road, and they had a back-to-back on the weekend. It is a tremendous matchup for Colorado. I think there are reasons to not want to play them. One being their price, two being they're going to be extremely owned, extremely highly owned, no matter the site. Three, they haven't been playing exceptionally well lately. Four, Cale Makar looks like he's going to be out tonight. They said doubtful. Doubtful to me means he's probably going to be out. I wrote about it in the picks article. Without Cale Makar, scoring on the power play for Colorado's top unit goes down over 20%. That's a lot. Now, they might get 4 or 5 or 6 opportunities against Anaheim here tonight because Anaheim takes so many penalties and Colorado draws so many power plays. But there are reasons to not play Colorado here tonight. But yeah, they are the best line in the best slot on the slate with a 4 total. Like, that 4 total tells you everything you need to know about this matchup with McKinnon, Rantanen, and Nichushkin eating all the minutes they are and skating on the top power play unit. So Colorado, one, perfectly in play. It's a matter if you can find other stuff you want to play with them. Speaking of cheap fillers, Ross Colton, Miles Wood, Logan O'Connor. This line is kind of the team's second line, but the team doesn't really have a second line. Like, Thomas Tatar looks like he's going to be a healthy scratch. Colton, Wood, and O'Connor is basically the team's second line, but they don't get second line minutes. They basically play 12 to 14 minutes a game, but they're generating a ton over the last 3 weeks. 3.9 expected goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Anaheim without Mason McTavish, there's nothing to be worried about in that depth. Like, we saw how bad Ryan Strome and Frank Petrano were defensively last year. I think Mason McTavish is a big reason for that turnaround this year, along with getting rid of Klingberg and Simon Benoit. But I imagine those defensive numbers are going to fall off for Anaheim. In a small sample without McTavish, 71 shot attempts against per 60 minutes this year. Like, if you want a Josh stack, and for anybody not familiar, that's just stacking 6 players from the same team on DraftKings. I think Colorado top line plus like Colton, Ross Colton, Logan O'Connor, and then one of the defensemen. I think that makes a lot of sense here. I think you can do that. I don't know if I'd outright 3-man stack them, but I don't mind Colorado 3. On the Anaheim side, like, for me, it's Anaheim 1 or bust. Like, with McTavish gone, I don't have any interest in that second line anymore. The Anaheim top line, perfectly correlated on the power play. Whether you want to call it the top or the second unit now, they've basically been splitting units, but they're still with Pavel Mintyukov on the power play. Colorado does take a lot of penalties, 3.8 times shorthanded per game. Obviously nowhere near Anaheim, but still a lot. They've been playing well. 59 shot attempts for, 40 against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. With McTavish out, they might have to play some more minutes here tonight. Not a lot of ownership on Anaheim either. Top Stacks tool is showing 2.6% on DraftKings here tonight. So I don't mind Anaheim 1, but obviously the Colorado top line is the feature of that game. All right, let's get to Minnesota and Calgary. Minnesota, 3.2 total. Calgary, 3.2 total. Also, some important news in this game. Jacob Markstrom still getting some treatment done on his right hand, still getting evaluation done. Took a shot off his bare hand in practice. Not good for a goalie. That means Dan Vladar's in net tonight. Our old friend Dan. He's not had a very good season. He had one good start recently. That was basically it for the season. His save percentage has been absolutely brutal this year at .883. Minnesota has looked better under John Hines. The thing about the new coach is it's tough because John Hines is a guy that does like to spread the ice time around, and it's something that we mentioned on the last show with Minnesota. Now, they've had a couple blowouts, so it's tough to say exactly where the ice time is going to fall. But, Matt Boldy has been kind of getting treated like a third liner. That's a little bit worrisome. And Boldy's shot rate, shots per minute or shot attempts per minute has not increased that much under Hines. So I think I'm out on Minnesota 2 in this matchup. I would just go to Minnesota 1. Minnesota's top line, pretty good in a small sample, 35 minutes under Hines, 68 shot attempts for, 37 against per 60 minutes. You get Zuccarello and Kaprizov on the top power play unit. Calgary's power play numbers have not really been that good of late. The power play numbers for Minnesota have been a lot better under Hines. They do draw a fair number of power plays. I think they're drawing the 6th most power plays per game on the season. 5th most, power plays per game on the season. Power play has looked better with Hines there. I like Minnesota 1 here. I'm not worried about the Calgary matchup, whether they use the top line, whether they use the backline line. Like, neither has been very good defensively so far this season. Martin Pospisil is out for Calgary. It looks like Walker Duehr is going to be in. I suspect Dylan Dubé goes up to the line with Zary and Kadri. It's a cheap line. I suppose you can use them, but it's Minnesota's top line that I like here by quite a bit. They're not coming in with a lot of ownership either. Per the top stacks tool, only 4.5% on DraftKings here tonight, 7.3 top 2 percentage. They are one of those like 16 to 8K, 18K lines that I do like here tonight, 17 and 19, whatever you want to call it. If you want to avoid chalkier Buffalo or chalkier Nashville or something like that, I think this is the pivot, especially with Vladar in net. A big part of the Calgary turnaround of late had been Markstrom's improved play. So, Minnesota for 1 for me on that side. On the Calgary side, I'm going to be honest, I don't have interest in stacking any of their lines. They're coming in all with negative leverage. Pospisil out here on the second line. Dubé in. That might actually drive up ownership because Dubé is a min-priced player. I think you can stack that line. That line now is, off the top of my head, $11,200. So it's now $1,000 cheaper than even the Calgary top line. Andrew Mangiapane got benched in their last game. I still think they're trying to figure things out. Like, if you want a one-off Nazem Kadri, one-off Jonathan Huberdeau, things like that, I think that's fine, but I just don't think there's anything I want a full stack. Minnesota's defense had been getting better even before John Hines came in. And Minnesota, their problem had been the penalty kill, and Calgary's power play is just, to quote Josh, sucks. So I don't have any interest in the Calgary side here. Like, it's kind of like Columbus to me. Maybe I'll one-off somebody from the lineup, but as far as full stacking, I think this is a pass for me. All right, let's move along to our final game here. We have the New Jersey Devils going into Vancouver. The New Jersey Devils have a 3.5 total. The Vancouver Canucks have a 3.3 total. Sorry, the Vancouver Canucks have a 3.4 total. Eric Holla on the top line with Jack Hughes and Tyler Toffoli. Second line of Andre Platt, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Alex Holtz with Timo Meier and Dawson Mercer on the third line for the Devils. The big news for Vancouver is that it looks like Filip Hronek is off the top power play unit, and they're moving Andrei Kuzmenko back to the top power play unit. This is why this is interesting. Is because Vancouver was not coming in with any ownership. I mean, none. 2.2% for that line with Kuzmenko there on DraftKings. Maybe that comes up a little bit now that Kuzmenko's back on the top power play unit. But if they're 3 or 4%, I really don't care. This is a 3.4 total, and we know how bad New Jersey's goaltending has been basically all season. Penalty kill has not been good. 5-on-5, it's not been good. There's no real matchup concern that worries me here. Obviously, you don't want them going into the Hischier line here tonight. But I suspect they're actually going to go out quite a bit against the Jack Hughes line. The Hughes line fine defensively, but they're allowing a lot of goals because of the goaltending. So Miller, Besser, and Kuzmenko, even if they come up to 3 or 4% because they're perfectly correlated on the power play, like, that's just fine for me. This is another one of those lines where if you want to get away from chalkier Nashville or chalkier Buffalo, that I think it makes a nice pivot. They're at home in a 3.4 total. It's just one off. It's just one off what the 0.1 off what the Islanders have, and we saw how much ownership was on the Islanders. Like, obviously, a lot of that is pricing, but it's not enough to make me want to just completely avoid Vancouver here. So I like Vancouver too in this matchup. Like, Vancouver's expected goals numbers, that line, really not great this year, but much, much better without Phil DiGiuseppe. Like, Phil DiGiuseppe is kind of just dragging down that line. And without him, 2.7 expected goals for, 1.9 expected goals against, generating over 60 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Brock Besser still around 15 shot attempts per 60 minutes just by himself. I like Vancouver too here. On the New Jersey side, I think I prefer the Jack Hughes line. I did write up Jack Hughes in the picks article today, basically because he's the pivot away from a super chalky Nathan McKinnon here tonight. And there's no ownership coming on the Jack Hughes line either. 4.1% ownership. They have pretty good offensive numbers without Timo Meier there. 3.3 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60 minutes. Tyler Toffoli leading this team in scoring chance contributions, which is just absolutely insane when you think about it, especially with Jack Hughes there. But Tyler Toffoli's having a tremendous season. I think it's the Hughes line and the Miller line I like best. That they're matching up against each other kind of worries me a little bit. In a nutshell, I would lean to the home team and lean to the JT Miller line, but it is Hughes and it is Miller I like best in this game. All right, we are going to wrap things up. Before we do, we have a couple more NBA shows coming up later today. 5:30 p.m. Eastern, you have the NBA Deeper Dive with Josh Engelman and Adam Schur. And at 6:30 p.m., you have the NBA Live Before Lock with Greg Ehrenberg and Eric Lindquist. Both shows brought to you by Better. Better is the sponsor for our show as well. If you'd like to try out Better, you can get up to $500, double your first deposit. Click through the link below. Let's get to some defensemen. I wrote up the obvious defenseman in the picks article. Devin Taves. He's probably going to be running the Colorado top power play unit now that Cale Makar is likely out. I also like Bowen Byram, kind of for a different reason. Like Anaheim's just not a very good team, and Byram's probably going to play 21, 22, maybe even more minutes here tonight with Makar, and obviously Sam Girard is still out. For the expensive defenseman, Roman Josi, I think, makes a lot of sense in the matchup. There are two guys that kind of separate themselves from everybody else. It is Roman Josi and Noah Dobson at home to San Jose. I think Rasmus Dahlin makes a nice pivot if you want to get away from a little bit of chalk, though. Dahlin might still flirt around 10% here tonight. In the mid-price range, like I said, Taves, I like him. Noah Hannafin, Calgary at home, 4,500, still running the power play for what it's worth. He's just a pretty good puck mover, and he'll play a fair amount of minutes. With Thomas Chabot out, I like Jake Sanderson a lot here tonight. He's probably going to get back to the top power play. He's a guy that can create offense. He's fairly cheap on DraftKings as well for his price. I think he's at 5K even here tonight. 4,900, sorry. So I don't mind Jake Sanderson. In the Detroit game, if you don't want to use Shane Gostisbehere running the top power play, I don't mind Moritz Seider. His shot rate has really come up over the last few weeks to where you'd want to see it. He's kind of the shot and shot block threat from that team. Maybe Pete Peel are going to chase Jake Wallman. If you want to, go right ahead. We love Jake Wallman here at Stochastic, but I do like Moritz Seider. For cheaper guys, Andrew Peeke might play tonight for Columbus because Eric Goodbranson may miss the game. So Peeke is 2,700. He might have to block some shots against a high-shooting Los Angeles team. So if you need a cheap source of blocks, just check to see if Goodbranson is out. If he is, Andrew Peeke might be the guy for you. Nikita Zadorov, 2,600 for Vancouver. Don't mind him. With Makar out, Josh Manson, 3,200. Don't mind him from Colorado either. Tyler Myers, I wrote up in the picks article. Even with Zadorov there, he still played 22 minutes in their game the other night. Don't mind Tyler Myers for 3,500 on DraftKings. Alex Romanoff is kind of like a shooter, I guess, more than Ryan Pollock these days, which is weird to think about. In a pretty good matchup at home to San Jose, don't mind Romanoff. I'll mention Brock Faber and Cam Fowler as well. In net, I think this is a good night for cheap goalies. I wrote up Elvis Merzlikins in the picks article against that Los Angeles team. Merzlikins has really turned his game around over the last month or so. Don't mind Elvis Merzlikins here tonight. Also have Kaapo Kähkönen on my list. At home to the Islanders. We've seen the Islanders struggle to score before. We've seen Kähkönen have great games. I think those are two goalies you can use here tonight if you want to save. If you want to spend up, I do like Thatcher. I feel like a Thatcher Demko slappy at this point, but I do like Thatcher Demko at 8K at home to New Jersey. If New Jersey can't fill the net, they can get a lot of shots, and that is exactly what you want from Demko on DraftKings here tonight. I'll mention Philip Gustafson from Minnesota. I think he's 6,700 on FanDuel tonight. He's probably going to carry a lot of ownership on FanDuel, but 6,700, that's really tough to pass up. Ilya Sorokin leads our projections. Definitely has shutout potential at home against San Jose here tonight. It's just whether you want to pay up for that shutout potential here. The guy I'm going with for my hat trick pick, fairly chalky, but I wrote about him in the picks article. He's always been one of my favorite players to watch. Let's see what he can do against Chicago. I'm going to Philip Forsberg. All right. A good value stack for FanDuel. Let's see what we can kind of figure out here. I'm looking through some of their cheaper stacks. You know, if nobody's going to play San Jose, like I think, again, that Hurdle, Eklund, Barabanov line from San Jose makes a lot of sense. You know, Calgary's still cheap, but, you know, what I'll throw out for a line that I think is kind of going under the radar a little bit is the Kings' third line, Dubois, Grundstrom, Laferriere. Like I mentioned, Dubois and Grundstrom, pretty good numbers in a small sample together. If you just want a two-man out of that, I think just fine. So San Jose 2, Los Angeles 3 for some cheap stacks on FanDuel. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with me for the last hour. Josh will be back. We'll both be back on Thursday for our next show. Again, please like and subscribe. Really helps us out. Give us the 5-star rating for our podcast. If you could be so kind, if you want to join better, you can get up to $500 to double your very first deposit. Just click through the link below. Do all that or don't. It's up to you. It would help us out. Either way, we'll see you guys on Thursday.